Many people know of astrology strictly through either horoscope columns or books on astrology. Many people know of astrology through individual work that they have done with an astrological consultant. As a professional astrologer, I've had the privilege of spending time with many of the great astrologers in the world. And we've had a chance to talk with many of these astrologers about what's coming up for this 2012 period. One of the important things to understand is that astrology in itself is not so much a tool to tell us how something is going to turn out. It's more importantly used to understand time as a roadmap so that we can understand the nature of the intersection that we're coming into and how that intersection corresponds or is part of a cycle of events that maybe go back in history, touch a present moment, and can be projected into the future. It is into this concept that we bring this video because we believe that it's important for all of us to get a better handle on what's happening now, because the future is not written in stone. What's written in stone is that 2012 will come after 2011, and 2013 will come after 2012, and that there are large changes in store for us, and you don't need to be an astrologer or a historian to know that these are extraordinary times. And from that standpoint, we are going to use the astrological metaphor, the astrological terminologies, the planets and the cycles and the signs in order to understand the nature of what's coming up for us on this planet, for humankind, as we move through this 2012. What's always fascinated me is the relationship between astrology and history. And as such, I've spent a lot of time looking back into the history of our country, the history of our civilization, and understand it in relationship to the movement of outer planets. For an example, we have the cycle of Uranus, which is an 84-year cycle. We have Pluto, which is about 250 years. Which means that every century and a half or so, that Uranus catches up again with Pluto. And it does this in a repetitive cycle that seems to correspond with great change here on Earth. The last conjunction, when the two align together, happened in the mid-60s. And every astrologer realizes that the conjunction of Uranus and Pluto, to some extent, defined the nature of what we now call the 60s. We are coming into a period where these two great planets, Uranus, the planet of change, Uranus, the planet of sudden change, forms its first new phase or new angle with Pluto, the planet of the unconscious, Pluto, the planet of evolution. And this first meeting of these two planets since the 1960s actually begins in 2012. This is not the same phenomena as the Mayan calendar long count end. This is something different, and the two should not be confused. On the other hand, they're happening at the same time. And this becomes an interesting observation. However, we are going to talk mostly about the relationship between Uranus and Pluto and look at it from a standpoint of the 60s and pre-60s connections between these two planets, and then project forward to what's going on now and through the 2012 period of time. When we look at these outer planetary cycles, we look at two planets as a pair, as an energy. Just like we look at the monthly cycle of the new moon and full moon, whereas once a month the sun and the moon line up, that's a new moon. Halfway through the cycle, they're opposite each other, that's a full moon. And then the ending of the cycle and the beginning of the next cycle is the next new moon. By the same token, we can do this with the outer planets, and they create rhythms that are of different lengths, some very short rhythms, some very long waves, and we're going to focus on the outermost planets because they create the deepest, longest waves of historical change. The 20th century was extraordinary because there were two separate alignments of these long wave planets. In the mid-1960s, we had a conjunction, that's the new moon phase, of Uranus, the planet of change, and Pluto, the planet of the underworld, the unconscious. In the early 90s, that really affected us from the late 80s through the early 90s, we had an alignment of Uranus and Neptune. Uranus, again, the planet of change, but Neptune, the planet of spirituality, of imagination. And there was a connection culturally between some of the art that was produced in the 60s and in the early 90s. But our focus today is going to be on the 60s conjunction of Uranus and Pluto, because in 2012, actually in 2012 through 2015, these two planets come to their first quarter square. They make a 90-degree angle with each other. And astrologically, just like in physics, the 90-degree angle is where the action is. To thicken the stew even further, we can talk about periods of great social change when there are these planetary pairs like Uranus and Pluto coming up in 2012 to 2015, like Uranus and Pluto in the 1960s. But sometimes these planetary pairs have a third planet that comes into the scenario. And that third planet right now is the planet Saturn, which is adding to the mix, making this Uranus-Pluto square of 2012 to 2015 even more potent, because Saturn has begun to already interact with both Uranus and Pluto. So we are feeling the front edge of the wave of 2012 to 2015, even as we record this now in 2008.